All right. So, well, welcome back, listeners, to another podcast of the Disability Network. This is now our second one, and things are moving apace. And joining me is my partner in crime from the last podcast, Lilley Berrington. Hi, Lilley. Say hello.
Hi, everyone. Lovely to be back.
And the chairperson of the Western Cape Disability Network, Dr. Michelle Botha. Say hello, Michelle.
Hello, guys. I thought you guys were having far too much fun without me the last time. I was very jealous.
Excellent, excellent.
So,
Good. Well, there we go. And our intention is to grow. In fact, I must sort of full disclosure here. We had every intention of having another person on the podcast who's far closer to the dirty end of the dial-a ride, but unfortunately she had a very poor signal and wasn't able to join us. But we will be having lots of guests in future episodes. So let's go straight in. Now, our last podcast, we were anticipating a protest action. We had just had the news of the dial-a rides, imminent curtailing of the services of dial-a ride. And we had decided to do a demonstration. So, you guys, we were all there. What are your thoughts about the demonstration on Monday last?
for me, it was a really encouraging moment in some ways to see how, as a pretty small group of organizations and individuals, the Western Cape Network on Disability, Dial-a Ride Users Forum, Black Disability Forum, and a few other key role players, we put our heads together and we got people there, which to me is really quite a feat. I know that on social media, a few people said, oh, ha, 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 you got there. So what's is the transport situation that dire? Look at all the people.
You're kidding. Did people really say that?
Yes. Yeah,
Oh,
that was, I think some people thought, gotcha.
So
We made a whole post
that.
about it.
Yeah, so I think let Lilley unpack that, because she wrote a response post about what people had actually gone through.
Perhaps before Lilley unpacks that, perhaps we should explain how people got there, and in the interests of transparency. I do believe the network had quite a considerable role to play in facilitating people getting there. Is that true?
Yes, so we decided as a board that we would make a pretty sizable donation to the transport costs of people, and how that that was in the form of minibus taxis with trailers. This means that, and this is also according to one of our affiliates who organized the transport and who is herself a wheelchair user. This means that people aren't being loaded into vehicles on ramps in motorized chairs. It means that they are being lifted out of their wheelchairs into a minibus, and their chairs are being folded and put into a trailer. And she was explaining to us the fear of that, the indignity of that, the danger of that for someone with a severe physical disability or impairment, of being lifted in an inexpert way. It can be damaging, it can cause injury, and it's just incredibly undignified.
Absolutely. That wasn't an ideal thing that we want to
not
repeat.
at all, but you do what you got to do.
Yes. So Lilley, unpack that a little bit more.
So I think that what needs to be realized is that for many, the cost was huge compared to what a disability grant provides, right? The disability grant is approximately 2,180 a month. I think that is the most recent data. And that's often less what non-disabled people spend even on petrol. And we need to acknowledge that a lot of people who were at the protest actually got there on their own dime. They really did pay themselves for that, right? They contributed.
Lilley, I wonder if I can just come in here and just share something from the protest, which I think for me personally and for all of us at the network, we just thought, wow, this really shows that people with disabilities, there's this narrative of like, dial-a ride's free, or people don't want to pay for the service. And the network had obviously given this donation so that minibus taxis could be organized, and those went to various areas. But after the protest, one of our affiliates who is from the Dial-A-Ride Users Forum said to the network, on the minibus today, we, as the users who were attending the protest, all kind of did a whip around and just gave what we could, so that it wasn't that you did this for us for free, or we just expected to get it for free. And they gave us a donation back of a couple of R100, which shows that even though people may not, we know that the private transport, the e-hailing, it's prohibitively expensive. But the idea that people with disabilities want a freebie or don't want to pay for a service is just nonsense. And that for us really, I mean, for me personally, it was touching because it showed, wow, people want to be here. And this is so important to people that they will risk their bodies to be here, and they will pay what they can to contribute.
Extraordinary story that I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. As opposed to that being a sign of why public transport is not necessary, that should be a sign of how important it is to people that many of these people can hardly afford food in a month because of this ridiculous grant, and because we all know how hard it is for disabled people to find employment, but they were actually willing to contribute something because we want to be contributing members to society, but it's very difficult when it's made so difficult for us to be, right?
Yes. And I think for me, what struck me was the numbers alone. I've been hanging out with some Brazilians online, and they've been very involved in the disability transport story in Brazil some while ago. And they were telling me a story of how the community stepped up and thousands came onto the street. And I remember thinking to myself, for several reasons, we would struggle to get that right here. But okay, we didn't get thousands, but then Brazil's a much bigger country. But those hundreds that came, and there were at least 200. Somebody estimated possibly
like
3. So that's remarkable, I think. I don't know of another almost spontaneous protest that actually generated quite so many people. So I think I was most impressed, and it shows something. I've said a long time, for years I've said about Dial-A-Ride that the supply and demand element of Dial-A-Ride has never been taken into account, and the best way of explaining that is the fact that it was oversubscribed from the beginning, and that by 2015 there were over 15,000 people on the waiting list. That's a supply and demand. And what we saw in that protest with the 300 people, let's say, demonstrated a demand and an expectation. And I was very proud, actually, from the numbers alone. Now, what are your thoughts about how it unfolded in the day? And we're bearing in mind we've got several things to talk about tonight, so I don't want to dwell too much on the demonstration. But the councillor himself appeared, and tell me something about that.
Okay. Apologies, Jeremy. I'd like to just quickly double back a little bit to comment on what you said. In that we were 300 people, which is already more than is often reported. People will say that we were generally 200-ish, but we were much closer to 300, if not more. And that's not even close to the amount of people who would have wanted to be there.
Lovely,
and
nice
that is
point.
Because of inaccessible public transport.
Okay. Michelle?
Can I speak to the...
Yes, please.
To how the day unfolded. So to his credit, Councillor Quintas did come out to meet us, and he was there, from what I understand, from the start, and he stayed throughout all the speeches. And I think it was good for him to see the anger in the crowd, and there was anger. And I think often as people with disabilities, there's this narrative around people with disabilities that we are generally resigned and good, angelic innocents, who are just stoic and resilient and,
and compliant.
And compliant. And I think it was really powerful for the city and for the councillor to see disabled people being very uncompliant, being aggressive. And there were insults thrown, but I felt good let's show that people with disabilities are multifaceted, and we can be flipping pissed off.
Absolutely.
And that's allowed, and that's so I thought that was good. We had some really powerful speakers, and Debbie Bedeen, who was supposed to join us this evening, was one of them. I thought she spoke with real clarity about the impact of how these cuts are going to really impact people. Anthony Galino, our colleague and friend, also spoke very powerfully to the councillor about just the lack of compassion, the lack of understanding, just the complete ignorance of
the lack of respect.
Yeah.
But I think, and he stole the show, I thought. But to me, the most poignant speech was, I think it was Warren, who is a father of a person who uses Dial-A-Ride, when he mentioned that his son has been using Dial-A-Ride since primary school, and he's now at UWC, University of the Western Cape, and this will stop. Yeah. And I thought, wow, what an extraordinary narrative there of a trajectory utilizing the service, warts and all. What a trajectory from primary school to university. Now, wow. And to me, that was the most poignant speech of all.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, so Warren himself is a parent, but that particular story he was reading on behalf of another set of parents who are the Daniels family, and their son is Sadiq Daniels, and he's the young man who attends UWC second year political science. And it's not as though tertiary education is massively accessible for people with disabilities. To get to tertiary level is such an achievement.
Absolutely.
And now that's being taken away from this very bright and incredibly articulate young man. I mean, I've heard him speak on his own behalf, as well as having his parents share his story as well. And also just what the councillor doesn't seem to understand is how Dial-A-Ride enables people to use motorized wheelchairs in a way that other public transport often doesn't. And that a motorized wheelchair is a massive makes a massive difference to someone in terms of their independence. You don't have the same freedom of movement in a manual wheelchair that you do in a motorized wheelchair. But of course, the councillor and the city don't seem to stop to think about that.
No, and Lily and I brought this up last week, the last podcast was, this thing has been poorly thought through. They have not applied their minds to the various, and that brings us to the old question of consultation. So let's exhaust the demonstration, and then I want to talk about the meeting that happened. It was the next day, wasn't it?
It was the very next day.
The very next day. So Lily, any more thoughts on the demonstration quickly?
Well, I would say that I did pick up on the simmering anger. And I think that all of us, because we were conducting a legal protest, nobody wanted to do anything wrong, but there was definitely a sense of simmering anger. And I think that definitely carried to the councillor, and I absolutely think that he got that. And just to add to what Michelle said earlier, we are so socialized to being peaceful activists, and our anger is never valued. And there's a term within the literature that says nobody likes a grumpy cripple. Now, of course, the term cripple is not acceptable for people with disabilities, but it was somebody with a disability who wrote that. There is such a stereotype about the grumpy cripple, the angry disabled person, and that carries over into so many other things, like the angry black person, the disgruntled LGBTQ member, etc. And that is the abrasive feminist. And that is it's a way that essentially silences people who have a very, very good right to feel angry. Absolutely. And we should be allowed to express that anger. Now, of course, one doesn't have to be unlawful in the expression of that anger, but we shouldn't always have to be so quiet about things that are really integral to our human rights and our dignity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so the upshot was that he accepted our, what do you call it? What document did somebody, I think you handed him something, did you
Yes,
not?
yes. So I handed him our memorandum. I handed it to him in Braille. We didn't give him a printed hard copy. That was a nod to the fact that
Yes.
the letters that were sent to blind and visually impaired folks at Cape Town Society for the Blind were in hard copy. He said to me, "I can't read this." And I said, "Yes, I know." And he said, "I
Did he
really
get the
do."
irony? Do you think he
I
got the
said,
irony?
I did say to him, "Please, do you understand what's happened
Yes.
here?" And he said, "Yes, it's not lost on me." I did email it to him later so that we could actually have a productive meeting the following day. So he did
Right.
receive it in print via email later in the day. And yeah, off we trooped to the Civic Centre, myself, yourself, Jeremy, and various other people who had been involved and had attended the protest the day before. So a very different setting. And I think we all went in, I suppose it depends on whether you are at heart an optimist or a pessimist. I certainly went in with some hope, but that was quickly changed. I
Yes.
very quickly realized, okay, we're not gonna get
No,
what
I
we're
have to
hoping
say,
for here.
I was a little more jaded from the beginning.
Yes,
You
but
know,
you are more jaded than me
this,
in
oh,
general.
excuse me. I am just more experienced than you. This is not my first
Don't
rodeo
worry,
with this lot.
I'm getting less and less idealistic as the years go by.
Well, that's the thing. You know, this is the trouble. I mean, on the one hand, I was pleased that we had a meeting, but I have seen these meetings before, and so it was absolutely everything I feared it would be. You know, I mean, he managed the room quite cleverly. I mean, they wrote down all the names. I noticed he used people's names when he recalled them when they had their hands up. That was quite good. He, you know, we spun around the room to hear who was there. He was terribly courteous. He didn't lose his rag once, I thought. And but neither did he particularly listen, I thought. The issue, there was one particular moment where I think we all saw this thing happen, didn't we? In the original in the original letter to dial-a-ride users, they used the term consultation, and there had been significant consultation. What do you think happened in that meeting that made us realize that that wasn't necessarily so?
I mean, it's
Mhm.
one of the things, it was the first demand in the memorandum was that we wanted to see a record of what consultation took place. In the response to the memorandum, it's even more clear that that doesn't exist because it's not provided. When we asked the question outright in the meeting, you know, who had been consulted, what consultation had taken place, one of the councillor's staff members, he sort of kicked it over to her. And her response was, it was a budgetary decision, so the budget was set in stone and there was no need to consult in that case.
Did
Because
she
there
say
was
it in
no,
those words?
she said, and I was taking copious notes at this point. I was writing down people's words as fast as I could. And she said something along the lines of, in a situation where it's a budgetary decision, consultation is not required. And her sort of what she was implying is that no amount of consultation would have changed the outcome anyway. And I thought you
Mm.
said the most, you really captured it when you said to the councillor, you know, you people are pathologically averse to consultation. You know, just, and I thought that was such an excellent and sort of concise way to
Well,
capture
you
it.
know, it's just born from sheer frustration of exactly that. You know, this thing that they have against consultation. It's the most amazing thing. I don't know where it comes from. Lily, you and I think Tanya, our colleague, actually brought up a couple of interesting theories around consultation. But there's a whole theory about administrations not consulting. What do you have to say about that, Lily?
There are many very academic frameworks around consultation and different levels of consultation. And While I can't speak to it immediately off the bat on an academic level by mentioning all the different levels of consultation, what the city has done was on the very lowest level of consultation.
Yes.
And it hardly even amounts to notification. Just
Yes.
evidenced by the fact that people who are blind received hard copy documents. And, to that I say that why is it that our governmental agencies know nothing about the theories surrounding consultation and political processes such as that, let alone disability theories?
Indeed. So the upshot is that from where I'm sitting, there was no whiz bang. And he promised that he would, however, after all our questions, and there were some really good questions and commentary in that meeting. And Michelle, I thought you were wonderfully assertive, and I mean, like I was channeling Joan of Arc actually listening to you. It was brilliant, especially when it was mentioned that this network has established, ironically, a very good working relationship with one element from the city, the Transversal Universal Access Subcommittee.
Correct, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we have brilliant meetings with them. And we've actually been quite sort of positive. And dare we say, we've actually thought we saw light at the end of the tunnel, no? Your point was so well made when you said, Councillor, I'm afraid that trust that we have established has now been broken. You were brilliant there.
I mean, what can you say? It was so baffling to me because that Universal Access Committee was set up after an engagement with Councillor Quintas himself.
Yeah.
And for him to say, oh, that's not our directorate. That has nothing to do with us. And for him to suggest that transport is somehow separate to universal access when it's the cornerstone of universal
Absolutely.
access was completely baffling to me. Plus, his staff member Cameron, I think it's Cameron Davids, who's the ops person for Dial-A Right, sits on that Universal Access Committee, and a part of me felt for him because I thought you're not in a very enviable position here today. But some of what came out in that presentation was frankly shocking to me. The attitude about people with disabilities that it revealed. Firstly, the kind of statement, and I don't think we even spoke about this afterwards, but the statement that was made about the budget and how they had expected that in April the budget would decrease. And then he told us with such, but actually, the budget increased in April because of all the public holidays. And we thought it would go down, but it actually went up. And I wanted to say, of course it went up because people with disabilities also want to go and do fun stuff on a public holiday, just like you. Don't you want to put your kids in the car and take them to the beach? Well, newsflash, And the other thing that came up in that presentation was a statement about people with intellectual disabilities and cognitive impairments as being a danger to themselves and to others. And that's when I really saw red, because I just thought, come on, you have sat in our Universal Access Committee. You have heard our folks speak about disability and awareness and inclusion and ableism. You know better than this.
Absolutely.
Serious.
And to your credit, you called him out on it, actually. So, I mean, that was almost the last thing said in the entire day. So well done. But
sorry, Jeremy, I'd like to quickly go back to something that Michelle said.
Yeah.
So I wanted to speak to what you said about public holidays and us wanting to go out to enjoy life along with anyone else. And there was a comment submitted from somebody from the Dial-A Right Users Forum today. And that was that this is the beginning of the silly season. We're going into spring now. It's going to be summer soon. It's going to be the festive season soon. And this particular user was lamenting the fact that, well, now I don't think that I'm going to be able to attend the Christmas parties, I say Christmas parties, but this goes for many religious holidays in that specific time of year. And this is December. This will be long after the cuts have been implemented. But now we are going into a period of time that's supposed to be celebratory. And for us, it's not. Because how are we supposed to participate in public life? How are we supposed to get to all these wonderful events in which we can participate equally, spend time with friends and family, and just be part of public life in a time of celebration? Are we only important when it comes to the economy?
Interesting. Wow, that's extraordinary, and I'm glad you highlighted that. That's amazing, and it's very, very sad. But now let's just pick up on something here. He promised something at the end of this meeting, that he would look at all our questions. They wrote copious notes, one imagines, one hopes, and he promised to come back to us by the Friday. Did he in fact come back by the Friday, either of you?
So we received his response on the Saturday. The
Oh,
30th.
well, damn, I suppose that's all. Give him a break
I
for
suppose
him.
that's
Fair
good
enough.
enough.
Yeah.
Look, I've read it.
Mm.
It is not inspiring.
Mm.
A lot of the questions are skirted. There's a sort of, where the questions aren't skirted, there's also a part of me that goes, well, it's all too late. You know, the sort of claims that we'll partner and we value the disability sector as a partner and a collaborator, it just rings so hollow, because it's like, no, you actually don't. We had to come and scream at your front door and then you let us in. And look, again, this comes from my idealism, and it also comes from how I was raised, that when you make a mistake, you say, I am sorry, I made a bad call. And it would build such a bridge to the disability sector if the city of Cape Town, led by Quintas, would just say, we made a bad call here. We are sorry. We should have come to you and we didn't.
But hang on, let's take it further. Would you say they say that and do something about it, or just say it?
No, of course they must do something about it.
Right. In other words, relinquish their thing.
That is what
just to say something that I said last time, is the bar is so low. You could probably gain goodwill by just saying I'm sorry. It wouldn't be enough, obviously, and we'd still keep pushing, but you could probably gain goodwill by just saying I'm sorry. Because the bar is that low.
I think he's trying by saying he's used the words tragic, terrible, they really regret this regretful thing. So, I mean, there has been that sort of language, which there is a humility there to a degree, but it nowhere does it lay that they're going to walk any of this back, partially or in whole, this tragic decision.
Well, of course, politicians will never be able to actually, I suppose, to be fair to them, I suppose, is they'll never be able to say I'm sorry because that loses face. But also, it would garner so much goodwill.
Absolutely.
In the various sectors, whether it loses face or not.
Yes, completely. There is in some schools of politics, particularly Trumpian schools of politics, you absolutely never say sorry.
Never back down.
But that's wrong. That's nonsense as well. It's absolute categorical nonsense, particularly dealing with a community like ours or a sector like ours, which has been so poorly dealt with for so long, so globally even. It would, as you say, it would mean a hell of a lot if there was a heartfelt backpedal here. There's a tiny little spark of hope in my crusty brain, which thinks, I wonder if they won't, in fact, walk back some of this somehow. Do you think there's a hope?
I don't know if there's a hope in my crusty brain. Here is the spark of hope. Here is the spark of hope in my crusty brain. The one thing this terrible debacle has done is it has brought players in the disability sector together in a way we haven't been brought together in a long time.
It's true.
And so the network has built this partnership now with Black Disability Forum, for example. So we have Cllr Rob on our steering committee. Fantastic disability activists. Suddenly there's that connection. We've been connected now with Disability Revolution, doing amazing work in disability advocacy and activism. So suddenly the sector, we're going, hey, you guys used to work over there and we used to work over here, and like we didn't even know about each other in a way. And if we did, we sort of just waved at each other and said, oh, doing great work. And suddenly we're all getting together and we're going, hey, let's make this happen. So I think we're not willing to stop looking for avenues to change this or to stop this. And behind the scenes, there is a group of people within this coalition who are working tirelessly at how to move forward.
Well, on that note, because Lilley, you, I think, have been very instrumental in social media postings. So what sort of social media and what sort of postings have you made? I mean, I sound like an old fart here. So tell us, what's been done? And you've done a lot of it.
Well, speaking as, I suppose, the resident millennial, I suppose that Michelle also qualifies as
I'm
that.
afraid so,
Definitely. Michelle definitely does qualify as that. I guess I'm the baby of the group, and therefore I've been entrusted with this massive task of social media. I do have to admit to not being in any way an expert on social media. In fact, there are some of our network members. I want to maybe highlight someone like Tanya, who's actually quite a lot better at it than I am. I'm just a writer. But I think I have been lucky. I am dealing with this kind of social media in a time where our particular issue has gained traction. For some reason, finally, a disability-related issue has gained traction. Whether that be, this has for some reason been something that has grabbed the attention of the public, and the media is writing about it. And I can't remember a time in my entire 32 years. Yes, I know many of you have been in the disability sector longer, but that it's ever been the case. When there's been disability-related issues, you'd have like a once-off media interest from one or two sources that publish an article and nothing further would happen. But for some reason, this seems to have grabbed the attention of national media, and many people are just running with that. And so we are running with that. And personally, I call myself a hopeful skeptic. But what I mean by being a hopeful skeptic is that the hopeful part comes in where I see things such as the fact that we had such a big turnout at the protest, the fact that we are having so much media attention. And so I feel like there is room to be hopeful. This could very much be a launching pad for a proper South African disability movement.
Yes, but the media bit, I mean, I am so over stupid media and who have cocked the whole disability narrative up so badly all the time, all over the world, who always get it wrong. They always misunderstand. They always misrepresent or write it badly. And for the first time, as you say, I've seen media grabbing onto this thing and hanging on. I've never known media to actually have, they've got a terribly short attention span. And they've seen this thing has clung on. And I think you've kept it alive. And because you've kept it alive, they've kept it alive. And so congratulations for that. And we need to keep that fire. And I think you're right. I think for the first time we're seeing unity of some description. Yeah. And it's ironic because there are some people with disabilities who have never really bought into Dial-A-Ride or been allowed to buy into Dial-A-Ride and have never been involved particularly. On that note, has there been much of a dissenting voice? Are there any people saying out there, oh, come on, guys, get a life and shut up? Or, I mean, let's hear the other side.
I was actually going to say I haven't heard any. Certainly within the disability sector, I haven't heard any. I haven't had any negative feedback from the people with disabilities in my circle, be they activists or academics. And I think it comes down to, it's something I actually said at the protest, is that some of us are dial-a-ride users and some of us are not.
Mm.
But when something is inaccessible for one of us, then it's inaccessible for all of us. I am super privileged. I can get into an Uber pretty much any time I want.
Mm.
I don't have access barriers in terms of getting from A to B.
Yes.
But if it's inaccessible for one, it's inaccessible for all of us.
The other type of comment that I also wanted to just highlight is people will say, but if there's no budget, there is no budget. And I wonder if Michelle can perhaps speak to that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the line, isn't it? I mean, that is the city's line. There is no budget.
Yeah.
And we just can't accept that. I mean, we've been sort of advised that there are ways and means. And Armand Bam wrote in the Mail and Guardian a week ago, and I thought it was it was really well put. He just said budgets are moral documents. Budgets reveal priorities. So let's stop talking about the budget and let's start talking about, let's go back to the decisions that were made around a budget. A budget doesn't just spring out of the ground. It's made, it's produced. Human beings put it together. They decide.
So what is being prioritized?
Well, it's one of the things that we asked in our memorandum, and it hasn't been well answered at all. It's a line around, well, we're investing in the My City Phase 2 rollout. This is the big investment, and this is going to make the transport accessible. But it's certainly not going to happen tomorrow when people need to get to work. And we know that there's still barriers with My City, and there will probably be people with disabilities who always need a specialized transport service. Not everyone, but there will certainly be people with severe disabilities who do actually need something like dial-a-ride, even in the utopian Cape Town where the My Cities are rolling and the trains have level access and it's just, wonderful.
Now, to close, what's next? I know he's promising he thought he was being terribly generous, so we're going to have bi-monthly meetings, I notice, in his last missive to us, yes. Meaning we're going to meet at the end of October. On the 8th of September, which is next
Monday,
this thing is closing. So what, as Anthony famously said on the radio, we can't give away our strategies.
Yeah.
But what are we going to do?
So again, without showing our cards, no, we're not going to take it lying down. As I said, we are working very hard to respond in two ways. The one is further action. We've got to keep this front of mind for people. We've got to keep it in the news, and we've got to continue to show that as a community we're not going to disappear. And the other side is that we need to explore the options that are available to us through the courts, which is what we're doing. And yes. we will not wait until the 28th of October. And we will happily meet with the councillor on the 28th of October. Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation. We will be there. But we cannot have dial-a-ride be phased out or scaled back or whatever they're planning to call it in the interim. And it comes back to this issue of consultation, because a bunch of folks sat down, cut a budget, and then decided who was going to be included and excluded and what the most necessary activities were. They didn't talk to users. They didn't talk to people with disabilities. They just sat down and said, well, these people don't need it, and these are the activities that they can do. And it's just the most medical model nonsense in the world.
Absolutely, which goes to the real point that and the three of us know so well, because we're all disability consultants in some form or other, is the fact that, like so many organizations, the city has no clue about genuine disability inclusion theory at all, and is making profound mistakes as a result. I mean, I've been in the space a long time, 25 years I've been banging around here, and they haven't listened to a word, and they're going to come short somehow by continuing this extraordinary dinosaur approach, where they're still quite literally living in the medical model time. for the sake of those who might not necessarily understand that reference, we obviously, as people who do this for a living, we drop terminology without realizing not everybody is necessarily au fait. So the three of us have used the term medical model now, and Michelle and Lilley. Michelle first, perhaps unpack very briefly, as opposed to what? Medical model as opposed to what?
Yeah, so in brief, medical model as opposed to social model. Medical model refers to a sort of traditional way in which disability has been viewed. The word medical references that this generally comes out of the medical field, but it's certainly not exclusive to the medical field. And it describes a belief that says disability is an individual problem. It's a problem that happens to the body, and it's not a political thing at all. It's an individual, personal tragedy. Right. In the 1970s and onwards, activists around the globe in various ways started pushing against that narrative and developed what we've come to call the social model, which says no, disability happens in society. Disability is produced by the way that society puts up barriers. So when the MyCity ramp doesn't deploy, that is in fact what's disabling the wheelchair user. And it just shifts the blame and the shame. It just says it's actually not disabled people's fault that there's lack of participation and inclusion. We actually have to turn to society and say, what barriers are you putting up or breaking down in order to enable people to participate?
In the same way that happens. Sorry, sure, yes. So in the same way that it might be the case with feminism, it's not the situation that you being a woman is the problem. It's the fact that society is not set up to accommodate you, because you are considered to be on a lower level of priority.
Nice one. When I teach diversity, particularly disability inclusion, what I always draw on, and I accompany it with another cartoon of mine, I call it the access to mainstream cartoon, but is the parallels I've always thought are amazing between the experience that people of color have had in this country and around the world, but we're in this country, so in this country particularly, and women, and the kind of garbage that women had to put up with for, centuries, and the kind of serious subjugation that people of color had to put up with in this country. Now, the access to mainstream society, that expectation, that demand, is precisely what people with disabilities are doing. We're just a little bit behind the curve, but the parallels are almost identical. And it just staggers me that there are still people out there that have not actually twigged this thing. I'm often wondered, you mentioned, Michelle, since the 70s. So it's 50 odd years, in fact more, about 55 years that since that paradigm began to shift into the new paradigm. 50 years. What is it going to take? And I have to remind myself that women got the vote largely around the middle of the 1920s. And yet they had to sit for another 50, 60 years listening to the kind of crap that men threw at them before something clicked into place. And so sadly, I suppose these wheels turn slowly. Yes, Lilley, one last thing.
I was just going to say, we are also taught and shown how to value ourselves, and often we behave accordingly. And this is why it's so strange to people to see disabled people actually standing up for themselves for a change.
Yes, but if you recall, both of you are students of history in a sense. If you recall, there was a great deal of pushback when people of color stood up against the subjugation that they experienced. And there was a lot of pushback when women stood up over the last 100 years. And more, obviously, but specific, so pushback, I suspect, and it's born of ignorance and fear, of course, but it's ultimately born of ignorance. And somehow we've got to, I can't help thinking that there's something positive. There's a gift under this dragon's wing somehow in that we can make a difference by educating people and getting people to see the picture here. with what's happening, which is why it's so important to keep the momentum. No?
Yes.
We don't see any immediate changes happening, but this to me is just the start of something that could become something phenomenal, because we have seen roadmaps of how it's been done by many different activist groups, such as women, such as the Black community in South Africa, such as the disability rights movement in the US. And eventually they did prevail. And I think that we need to take hope from that, but we can still come together as a collective and we can still make a massive difference. And I'm hoping that this is a springboard for that.
Thank you. Michelle, your last words.
I agree. I think the silver lining here is the coming together of people within the disability sector, people with disabilities, and organizations who had perhaps missed each other before, and just coming together to say, actually, we are stronger when we work together, and we can put our heads together, and we can actually do amazing things in very short amounts of time if we all just, put our hands up and combine our abilities. So we're certainly not going to go away and just sort of slink off into the night.
And so, listeners, thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure. And we'll be back in the next week or so, I suspect, with more. And Michelle and Lilley, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy.